Hi, Tessa. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's fun to be with somebody who I know is kind of working in the same vein as I am.
Yeah, obsessed with career, I guess, development, job search, making it less terrible to go to work, right?
Yes, less terrible. I love that.
Okay, so tell everyone who you are and what you do.
So I go by the job doctor or job doctor Tessa on social media, and I help people get the job, get the pay, get the promotion, get out of trouble sometimes. So everything that has to do with career navigation.
How did you become known as the job doctor? I mean, clearly you must have done something right to get this amazing title.
Well, it's kind of funny because I have always given advice to friends and family, and I've been known as the person to call for career advice. But my daughter back in the pandemic said, Mom, you have such good stuff. I want to share it on TikTok. Can I do that for you? And I'm like, yeah, knock yourself out. I can't even log in. It's such a confusing app. So she put me on TikTok, and 3 days later, my son called from California and he said, Mom, my girlfriend said she saw you on her For You page. Is that even possible? And I went and looked, I had 10,000 followers, and
Wow.
it's just grown exponentially every day. And I guess I didn't think I had that much value to give to people. But now in helping thousands of people, I realized that, having that unique seat in HR behind closed doors and seeing what's going on both sides is actually really, really valuable to people. And so I've made a full time go of it. And I've gone from the corporate side to helping the individual on the other side of the equation.
I love that. And, we need more people who are the entrepreneurs who have been there and done that in the
Hmm.
corporations. Those are the people we're looking for the advice from. Sometimes I think TikTok and Instagram makes it so you can get advice from anybody. It's good to know that like a real professional is out there giving us advice. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, so you also have a book that's called The Unspoken Truths for Career Success. What are these truths, and is it important for us, and like, why is it important for us to recognize them?
Well, essentially, it's how to navigate power and pay and promotions at work. Because I think most of us go into our career, me included, not understanding what actually happens behind the scenes and behind closed doors. And when you're in the room that it happened, to use a Hamilton phrase, you realize that there are common things that either upend a career or things that help people get ahead. And I just, so the lies of the workforce, I go through those and say, here's the lie that you may believe, and reframe it with the truth. So there's chapters on pay, lies about promotions, lies about people. What can you expect from companies, from managers, from HR, and how to use that to your advantage? And how do you work through the politics of a company, which is a huge thing for people as well? And then how do you make a decision whether to stay or whether to go? I think that's important as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like you touched on some big ones where there's like the actual topic, pay, promotion, and then there's the people part. And I feel like they're definitely the quote loose cannon part of it all, because you can ask for the raise perfectly, but you're doing it to a person, not a robot, right? Not a machine. So there's a lot to navigate when you're in the workplace because you have those two competing, I guess not even like priorities or viewpoints, but people are emotional, and the process of asking for a promotion or a raise has to go through a person. So
It
you've
it
got a lot
does.
going on.
And yet people are also extremely predictable in companies in terms of there's certain principles that if you use are going to help you. Like if you use us versus them language is in a very simple example, you're going to lose that discussion. It's immediately you're going to be on opposite sides. But so many problems in the workplace boil down to communication and the way we communicate the right thing the wrong way. And so that's why so much of my book are helpful scripts and tips and say this, not that, and do this, not that, because people make the same mistakes over and over.
Yeah, yeah. I have found a similar theme in hosting this show, that a lot of career success, career development comes down to communication. And it's
Yeah.
like one of those topics where you kind of learn it in school, but not in the way you kind of need to. So it's more like you're perfecting it on the job or working it out on the job. um I want to talk about the lies you mentioned. So how, like, first of all, give me some examples of the lies, and then explain to me how these lies keep people frustrated at work.
Okay. One lie is if I keep doing the thing that got me rewarded in the first place, I will continue to grow in a company, for example. And that's not true. we actually have to evolve through the 5 stages of career growth. And as you do that, different rules of the game emerge. So, simple example, when you first come to a company, you measure success by how well you follow your manager's instructions. Do you do it? Do you not? And if you do it faster or better, you win. But that is not true when you get to the next stage, stage two. If you can't figure out the in between, how to get the work done, and you have to ask your manager everything, like, what do you want me to do now? What about now? What about now? You will fail. And likewise, when you go to a stage three, you begin to have to determine what the right things to do are. And so your manager's not even outlining, do this by when, here's the broad objectives. At some point, you have to define the broad objectives and what's most important. And people have a really hard time picking what's most important. And you also, as you grow in a company, you have to get better at collaborating cross departmentally, because working in a silo and just counting on yourself doesn't work anymore. You'll fail in a stage four if you're in a silo. You have to be able to get along with other people, other egos, people in and outside the company. And so the rules change as you go.
Yeah, no one wants to hear that, but it's very important
It's
advice to
true.
share. Yeah, no, it really is. And to your point of like there used to be a saying, I heard this once in entrepreneurship, like the thing that grew you to 100,000 followers or $100,000 is not the same thing that will grow you from 100,000 to 500,000 or 500,000 to a million. And I feel like kind of what you're describing are these stages is like the tactics that get your foot in the door or get you as that new employee is very
Right.
different than moving along the chain. And that's really, really incredible advice. I think that I haven't heard a ton on this show, especially. So I really am grateful. And it's a lie like that that's going to keep someone frustrated, right? Because they're going to be wondering,
Right.
I'm doing the same thing I've always done, but it's not working the same, right?
Yeah. And it actually is what held me up in my career. I got to a point when I first started, I was so good at just figuring out what my manager needed and just doing it without them needing to talk to me about it. And they loved me for it. I was the hero. Like, you can give it to Tessa and count on it being done. But when I got higher up and I was reporting to a CEO, the CEO at one point said, "Hey, I just found out you were working on this thing over here. I had no idea you were doing that. Why didn't you tell me?" And I'm like, "Well, I was just trying to, keep it out of your hair so that I could just get things done." And he's like, "That's going to kill you, because if I knew you had that skill set, I could have helped you do more of that. I could have helped you get other people see you in a different light. And managing up to tell me what you're doing is every bit as important as just getting stuff done. And it's actually hurting you and has held you back." And I was like, "Oh, wow, that is such an epiphany that I actually shot myself in the foot by doing the same thing that got me promotions early in my career." And I had to change the way I did things and start to think it's not self-promotion to let your manager know what you're working on, and to let them know what you're capable of so that they can help you move your career forward.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you determine, if you're feeling frustrated at work, or, I think oftentimes kind of the process will be maybe you don't know what's frustrating you at work or what
Yeah.
lie, is keeping you
Mhm.
held back. How do you determine the thing that's nagging on you and making you say, I don't know, maybe I like need to start looking around. Like it's often like a feeling you have first, so you
Mhm.
can't pinpoint exactly to the thing. So how do you identify what this frustration or lie is that's holding you back?
That's a great question. I can't tell you how many phone calls I have that start with, "I can't stand it anymore." And I say, "We got to figure out what it is, because it can
Yes.
be a lot of things." I think people should do what I call a values analysis. And it's in my book. And there's basically 5 things you should measure about your company. And they are things like, how much autonomy am I given? How much of a difference can I make? How important is it that I have really strong relationships with people? It's not important to everybody. And there's several other factors. And then you rate your company on it, and then you rate how important is it to me personally, independent of how the company does. And when you do the values analysis, you realize the key to picking a job that you can like and enjoy and grow in has a lot more to do with that match than it does whether they made the Glassdoor's best places to work. Could be a
Right.
horrible place for you to work. What I learned when I did it on myself is that I actually valued building something, but I was a terrible maintainer. Once it was
Mm,
maintaining, I got bored. I'm a builder. I had no idea I was a builder till I was 50 years old. And then once I realized I'm a builder, not a maintainer, I could pick jobs and things that and projects that were really interesting to me, and it brought out the best in me versus picking something just because somebody said, oh, it's a great company to work for. So I think
Right.
that's a really important thing for people.
Yeah, if you're feeling frustrated, take a step back, do a values assessment on the company plus yourself and see where there's an overlap. And then you'll see maybe this company and this role is a mismatch. And so this feeling is
Yeah.
like very valid versus, I guess, if it's not a mismatch, is it more like, okay, this is a one-off thing that you have to figure out, like, how do you have that tough conversation? Or how do you, yeah, okay.
Yeah. If it's not a big mismatch, if you don't have more than 2 points variation, then I say typically that means there's something you have to fix with it. Almost always boils down to communication. You're not expressing what you want, or you're not having the right kind of dialogue with your manager to get you where you need to go. And quite honestly, people shouldn't feel bad about it because everybody everybody I talk to says, I'm really good at communication. My manager sucks, the company sucks. And the truth is, we all suck. We all suck when it comes to managing conflict. And, but being able to express in a way that doesn't put your job at risk what you want and where you're trying to go is extremely powerful to somebody. Never let your career be in the hands of somebody else. You should be your greatest advocate. If
Yeah.
you're not, who knows where you're going to end up? But if you are your greatest advocate, you can write the script for your manager. Ask them for what you specifically need rather than hoping they cue into it and figure it out. And you can go faster, further.
Yeah, I love that. That's really good advice. What's the one skill that people need to cultivate that will make their boss want 10 more of them? They're like, that quality, I need more of it.
I think the biggest one I call it playing in the gap. Playing in the gap is this idea that um, what the company says they want to be, which is very different from what they are, that gap, and within your job, figuring out the biggest problems to solve within your area of influence. Playing in the gap is the biggest thing. You have to be able to see and solve problems. And as a hint, they're not going to show up on your job description because your job description is a piece of crap. It's written by somebody in a dark office right before they go home, or it's written by a consultant to give the company some structure, but it really isn't the guide to a successful career. You need to, the first thing I would tell people to do in a company is to go visit with stakeholders in the company, the departments that cross paths with you, ask them what their pain points are and what they're expecting out of the job. I promise you it's going to be different than what's on the job description. And the key is picking the low hanging fruit and the things you can win and the
Yeah.
problems you can see and solve, not whatever your job description happens to say your job is.
Yeah, it's like do the job that's needed, not the job that you were hired to do, right?
Yeah, that's your first job is to sort out what the real job is from the job on paper because
Which
they're just so different.
yeah, it just seems so counterintuitive. You're like, well, I got hired for this job. They wrote a job description, but don't actually use that to figure out what job you're supposed to be doing. But
Yeah,
it's very true. And I also think like in today's working world with things moving so quickly, like I don't think it's always malicious that they're trying to not make the
not
job
at all.
description helpful. It's just that that's like real life, right? It's in real time,
It
it's moving
is.
along.
It's real life. There was a guy I hired that was hired to hire a bunch of commission only salespeople. It's a really hard job. They hate HR. They didn't want us to touch it. And every time they would hand over a candidate, the sales manager would be just like roll his eyes and be really frustrated. And he says, you don't know how to recruit these people. We know better than you do. And the guy recognized in a very short period of time, his job was not to get all the candidates and recruit them. His job was to find candidates and create an event where the sales leader could recruit them. So
Ugh,
his job was to create energy around events and fill a pipeline, not recruit. And had he not realized that, it would have been really easy for him early on to say, this company's not ready for me as a recruiter. They're not ready to work with HR. Worst company I've ever worked for. I'm out of here. But he recognized that he needed to play in the gap. And he became incredibly successful. So much so the sales team said, we want him and the whole team to come to sales. We don't want him in HR. We just love him so much. We want to work with him directly. So you have to understand what the real job is from the job on paper. It's always going to be different.
yeah, no, that's really good advice. And I like that you call it playing in the gap because I almost feel like it visually I can understand what that means. It's
Mm-hmm.
not going to the other side and doing your boss's job. It's not staying on your side. It's what's in the middle part. What are some other examples of gaps that might exist? Like I love that story, but I guess for people who are tangibly trying to apply this advice, like
Mm-hmm.
what might a gap look like?
Let's just go through a couple of categories, big categories. Like it could be an innovations gap. It could be a software gap, something that actually helps a process work smoother. It could be an efficiency gap, something that's really clunky and not working well in the company that you can streamline. Um, it could be um, it could be a gap around saving money, in a way the company can save money. So an admin, for instance, came to me and said, "I'm just an admin. I can't make a difference in the company." But we really worked with her, and she ended up saying, "Huh, these board books that I do every quarter, they're really clunky, and we send them, urgent mail. They get to the board members. Nobody can get on the right page. We're having last minute meetings. It costs us a fortune to mail everything." And she worked with IT and came up with a repository that was online so they could look up past, future, present board books. They saved an extra week. They could have extra meetings. They could get on the same page. It was easier for the board members to find them. So she really, through technology, found a technology gap in her
Yeah.
role as a secretary, and it made a huge difference. Not only was she saving about 500 a month in postage, but she was saving the sanity of the board members and the CEO of trying to find materials from previous board meetings. So it's available to everybody at every level that you can
Yeah.
find gaps. There's always problems. And when you first go to a company, you know them, right? You go to a company, you go home and say, "What is happening? This thing is a mess." But we lose it after about 6 months. And then we just, like water following its path, we just kind of get in line and we do the thing that doesn't make any sense. But if you can see it with fresh eyes, you can often open it up and find those gaps.
Yeah, it's almost like when you enter a new job, especially or like a new role, like write those things down. So six
Yes.
months from now, you kind of remember them. No, these are really good tips. I feel like we've gone through, if you're feeling frustrated, we're kind of recognizing the lies versus the truths that, a lot of us kind of fall into place with. If you're feeling frustrated, are you recognizing a gap at work? Are you, addressing that gap, or are you kind of just saying, I'm just going to keep trying to do my job? Which could be not helpful, right? It doesn't feel good to be doing work too that no one really cares about. And I feel like if you're not doing the work that's in the gap, sometimes it's like, oh, she's over there and she's doing her job. It's not really the job we need, but whatever, they're doing their job. But that doesn't feel very good to be that person, right?
No, I think the deepest need of anybody in the workplace, everybody at every level, is I want to feel seen. I want to feel like I'm making a difference. And yet so many people say I'm invisible. I'm just a cog in the wheel. I'm a ghost. And the way you are not a ghost is you have to get really locked into what are people expecting out of this role? What is the problem the company is trying to solve by this role that I'm in? And as you talk to people, you will find that it evolves and changes. But as you prioritize the things that are important to the people you're serving, you will find that you will be working on more of the right things and less of the wrong things.
Yeah, that's really well said. I like that a lot. Okay, so finally, let's talk about change at work. There's a lot that's going on around these days. So, can you share your formula for surviving and even thriving during company change?
Yeah, there's a lot of people struggling right now, me included, with change and so much change. I would say the first thing that I need to tell people about around change is going to tell lies to your brain. If you're in a company that is undergoing a lot of change, your brain will tell you you're in the wrong place, the wrong company, the wrong role. So know that your brain is going to say that. And it is just because it is uncomfortable. It could be you're in the wrong place, but more times than not, I mean, I've done so many reorgs and so many massive changes to companies that I can tell you when I go into a company, people are going to tell me these three things: the company's going to die, the culture is changing, and you got to get out while the getting's good. That's what people
Yeah.
say. But
Yeah.
95% of the time, the company doesn't die, the culture doesn't die, and something new emerges. And a lot of people who stay the course during change and outlast the people that go where the grass is greener or where they think it's greener end up with the promotions, really aggressive promotions, because people leave and there's gaps everywhere. And if you can stand through the ambiguity of I call it the red zone, there's great gifts on the other side of a red zone with a company. because a red zone makes you, it's the trigger for innovating. You have to do things differently,
Yeah.
and most people don't naturally evolve and say, I'm going to fix what's broken. Like in a marriage, we don't say, hey, the marriage is good. Let's go to counseling now. We wait till it's falling apart, right? We wait till the last possible minute. And the same is true at companies. We don't change the system, the structure, the way things are done until somebody barks too loud or until our job's going to go away or until
Yeah.
there's a riff and we have to do it different. So I tell people, stay through change, give it at least 6 months. And you'll find that getting through the red zone better prepares you for how to deal with the problem the next time it hits. It will make you over time a very valuable employee to a company because they're going to look at that resume and say, that person made it through red zones. That person didn't just job hop. To be there for 2 years or 2.5 years, they had to have been through some tough times and they know how to solve problems. And you also, as a candidate, can say, oh, I've seen that before. I know how
Right.
to implement that system. I know how to fix that problem. And so rather than running away from a red zone during change, try to embrace it for what it is, which is an opportunity to actually increase your credibility and your worth, your net worth on your resume. I would say staying through a change on average is worth about $10,000 to somebody.
Wow.
So
I
it's
love
it's a
that.
delayed gratification, but in the next job you go to, it's worth about $10,000, those skills that you gain.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. And I feel like what you were saying is like a lot of people will jump ship. They're like, I don't want to stay for this messy thing. I'll just go find something
Yeah.
that quote the grass is greener. But you don't have the relevance. You don't have the storytelling of I lived through this thing. And I think good job interviews all come down to how good your stories are because that's what we as
Yeah.
humans really like. And so when you're able to tell the story of the dramatic change and the solution at the end, it's really fun and inspiring and it makes you stand out as a candidate. So this is a really, really good point. And I like that you said you're worth $10,000 more because you can literally put a price on this is a learning moment for me that is going I can leverage later on for the future.
Yeah, and I know there's people listening saying, "Yeah, but I can get 10,000 more if I just job hop to another job." And that may be true, but cumulative over time, if you show that you're able to stay through those red zones on a resume, you will find that you're more successful because you do know how to solve those problems. You have had to innovate around them, and it becomes easier and easier for you. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a delayed payout, but it's a payout nonetheless.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know that we're in a tough job market, but we're seeing way less job hopping right now. Like I just talked to someone the other day and she was like, "Oh, I'm ready to find my 10-year company." And I was like, "Your 10-year company?" She's like, "The
Wow.
company I stay out for 10 years." And this is a person who's younger than me. So definitely more millennial Gen Z. And I thought that was really interesting. I was like, during COVID, I feel like it was all about like I had people coming to
Yeah.
me being like, I feel like I'm missing out because I'm not thinking about leaving my company because that's how many, job hopping or people were moving around in jobs. So maybe we're entering a new era and red zones will be, a thing that people are more proud of
Interesting.
and stick through. Well, we'll see. Because I do think that I agree with you. I think the storyline of job hopping and how you're able to excel your career and especially your salary, I get how compelling that is, but there, depending on the timing of your career, I also think there's a very strong argument for hanging out and sticking with the discomfort of the red zone and learning opportunity that comes with that.
Yeah, it's a balance, right? It's a balance. We all know that moving to another job is the fastest way to typically get a big increase, and I that's not lost on me. But and many of the experts of today are saying that the average person will hold 30 jobs now. Our Gen Z people hold 30 jobs in their lifetime, which blows me away because in my generation it was 8.
Yeah.
So I think it's moved one way a long ways, and we'll see where it goes. I'm
Yeah.
just saying there's a middle ground that
I
makes
know.
sense.
I know. Maybe we could just all agree extremes are not working that well, but yeah,
Hmm.
we'll see. Tessa, this has been such a fun conversation, and I feel like you gave some really good kind of directions about, if you're feeling frustrated at work, there's option one, option two, option three. So I'm grateful for that. Tell people where they can find you, follow the job doctor, all the things, so we can put those links in the show notes as well.
Wonderful. They can find me on thejobdoctor.com. That's where most of my products are. And they can find me on any social media channel pretty much at Job Doctor Tessa. And in my bio link, they'll be able to find the values analysis that I briefly talked about, they can find that and download it for free if they want to do a values analysis on their life and their job as well. And that is
Amazing.
also in the book. So you can buy my book at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, anywhere books are sold.
Amazing. I'll put all of that in the show notes so you guys can easily access it. And thank you again, Tessa. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here.